Hey everybody, welcome to the In All Things podcast. It's time to see God in everything. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the In All Things podcast, or maybe this is your first time, and if so, welcome just for the first time to the In All Things podcast. But for us, we're back, and
for the third time.
It's season 6, and what episode is this?
Fourth time.
Episode four of this season.
Year?
Like 70 some for
sure. Yeah. So excited to be back. And how's everybody's Sunday? How are we feeling this morning? It's a Monday morning here as we record this, and it's going to be a warm Monday. So
yes,
and sunny. So hopefully that helps our moods. But
yes.
How was Sunday yesterday? It was a big day, I feel like. We had baptisms and full Sunday. So let's jump in.
I'll go first. Great day. Great attendance, 9 baptisms. We started a new series, according to his best friend, looking at the book of John. A lot of people responded to the message, and then worship was awesome as well. And then last night, you can talk about that, but man, there's parents' night at the well, and we had a great time, and it was a huge crowd, like 140?
Yeah. I think in the scramble we didn't get a real head count, but we should have. But all I know is that we have 105 plastic red chairs ish, and we ran out of those and had to add probably about 30 to 40 gray chairs from the main auditorium. And pretty much not every seat, but pretty much every seat was taken. My leaders were standing in the back of the room, so I would say easily 140, if not a little bit more. So it was a full night. We hadn't really done anything like that before, of inviting parents to come with their students to the well and just kind of see what we do. And I did welcome at church yesterday morning, and as I was going on stage and running through everything in my head that I had to talk about, it hit me of like, oh, this is also a really cool opportunity for parents to kind of force students that don't go to the well too to come with them tonight. And so I kind of last second threw that in there, and there was a couple students there that I had never seen there on a Sunday night, which was really cool because that means that some parents took advantage of like, oh, I'm going to make you go with me, which sometimes is all it takes for students to get involved. So it was a really good night. It was a lot of fun, and I didn't know what the parent response would be. And it was cool to see the different dynamics. You had some students that you could tell were really excited to bring their parents with them to like what they get to do. And then you had some parents that were probably like, I saw that like students and parents walk in the door and then like not talk to each other until the end of the night. So it was kind of funny, the mixture of the two. But I thought it was awesome and different.
Yeah, I think for me, it was I had some moments where, you guys did the worship, the student-led worship, and just watching them up there, and got choked up where I couldn't even sing. It was like the worship part of focusing on the Lord, but also just seeing our next generation, leading in the way they were leading with confidence. That's not everywhere, and you have to, you should be proud of them, and I'm proud of you with the leaders and all that they're doing, because that is that bodes well for the future of Sycamore Creek Church. And I know Jared, bringing you into this conversation, your oldest daughter is how old? 9?
9.
So a few years away from being a part of it. And it is just a healthy, growing group. And it's really cool to see all that come together last night. And the series that you're in was perfect. And you had everything put together so well. So it was just a great night. I expected it to be good, but you and I talked last week, and like, I've had parent meetings and have like 15 parents show up when it's an off time. I don't know how this is going to go. Those were your words. And I was talking to Nick, my son, about it. He's like, oh, Dad, there's going to be a crowd there. I'm like, I don't know if everybody's going to bring their parents. Well, it looks like almost everybody did. There was some kids without parents, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, the parents probably outnumbered the students last night.
It was close.
It was awesome.
Yeah. It was a good time. Jared, how was your Sunday?
It was a good time.
Yep. That's all you got?
Yeah. Baptism Sundays are crazy. They're always a blur. Everything goes by so quick because there's so many details to work out. Worship center, getting the worship center feed working. Me and Josiah were scrambling in the morning because something wasn't working correctly, and then got it working, and then we exhaled and then moved forward, and then we had a good time. So it was cool. It was neat. I was going back and forth and from the lobby into the worship center to kind of like just make sure everything was working. And it's such a cool thing to be able to see that happening in real time when you kind of like peek back and forth. And you see, like, I think second service, it seemed like there were probably like 50 something people in the lobby, more in the worship center. And it was like full on like celebration mode in there too. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, I miss being out there. I miss seeing what's going on or what it looks like on the screen. But all the feedback I'm getting from people is maybe we finally figured out and got the right technology to make it work for both. But for now, until we change it
until
again.
We're like, oh man, this is getting old. Let's find some cool way to do this.
But yeah,
but I think that it's always worth the effort to put in, go the extra mile for those moments to celebrate as a church together. So, whatever it takes, I guess, creative wise, and, however much extra energy it zaps out of us is always worth it, just because, like we were talking about these people that get baptized. I mean, you get baptized one time, if you do it correctly, like for the right reasons, right? You get baptized one time. So it's a big deal for a lot of people.
Right.
And so it's cool for us to be able to walk alongside them and make that moment special. So yeah, but it was cool. It was a good day. Yeah, it's fun. Worship was good. Worship was fun. The message was okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right.
From you, Jared, I take that as a huge compliment.
Yeah, at least I said something.
It was
about
okay.
it. No, it was good though. Like interesting going through John, just like focusing just on John. I mean, have we ever done that?
Well, the last 3 years I've been doing Mark and then Luke and then John. I guess next year I'll do Matthew. I kind of have led them up to Easter so that it kind of culminates the series on Easter. But this year we're going to go 1 week after that, a story that follows the resurrection. But I love John. I love I'm so excited already about this next week, about the story with Nicodemus. The most famous verse in the Bible is included in this week, but it's just seeing the dialogue and the way John recorded things. I've had several people tell me they're so excited because they love the book of John. It's a book that I point people to. A lot of times new believers say, hey, where should I start reading the Bible? Start with John. I mean, John's a great place to start. So,
do you think you inadvertently fueled anyone's desire to drink wine yesterday?
Well, a few people told me.
I'm going to go home and have a whole bottle.
Yeah.
What did you say? How many glasses of wine?
It was 4,000 plus glasses of wine.
So like
Jesus
either that
produced.
was a huge ceremony with a ton of people.
I hope there was a lot of people there.
They were getting lit.
I hope there was a ton of people.
But you were like, hey, it was a cultural thing. Well, that's somebody's excuse now, probably. I'm just trying to be like the Jews. I
mean, but a few people did tell me they know. Like back then, it was. The drinking water availability wasn't like it is today, purified, safe water. Had a lady yesterday afterwards who's German who came by, and of course I referred to how Germans are known for their beer drinking, and Jews, in first century weddings, known for drinking a lot of wine. But it wasn't just to get wasted. It was just a regular drink that they had. But yeah. So I don't know. I hope everybody took it. I was very clear about what the Bible teaches about drunkenness and abstaining if you have any kind of tendencies toward addiction, your family. It's just better choice. Yeah. But anyway.
I think that miracle, just to kind of my thoughts on that yesterday, you had asked us early in the week, like, what was the point of, like, why did Jesus do that?
Yeah.
And I thought a lot about that. But I think one of the things we don't really think about is that I think that miracle specifically just kind of gives an extra bit of humanity to Jesus. Like you were saying, it's not, most of his miracles weren't like surrounded by all this fanfare. I think that's what you were talking about. Like they were just kind of like, he just did these things, like that was just one of them that like, he's just another person there at the wedding for the most part, at the party for the most part, and then all of a sudden, like he just does this thing that, like, he's a man of the people, right?
Right.
Like,
we don't even read. Of course, John doesn't tell us what happens afterwards. I would imagine word spread that it was Jesus that did this, but in the moment, it wasn't like, "Hey, look at me!
Yeah.
Look at how amazing I am for you," or anything like that. So yeah, it was. I would say, like we were talking earlier in the week, it was one of those ones where it's like, what is the direct application of this miracle to our lives? So I tried to just pull out multiple things, and one of the things that stood out to me is just that this was the first week of his ministry, and this is a thing he chose to do with his first 6 disciples, is just hang out at this feast.
Get drunk.
Yeah. Not drunk. Jesus wasn't drunk.
For my first miracle.
Well,
sorry.
all right.
Yeah, I agree though. I think it shows a lot of his humanity, and there's Old Testament prophecies about when the Messiah comes, his joy will be greater than the whole nations. It's that's kind of the language of the Old Testament, and so for him to come in his first public miracle to be something like this, I think tells us a lot about who God is and the character of God, and I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so that's some good stuff that's happening in our ministries and in our lives and church yesterday. And so we're going to flip it a little bit today. We thought it would be interesting. We just wrapped up a series called ROI, Return on Investment, and it was money focused and money driven. But the bigger concept is that you're constantly making investments, and whether it be relationships, whether it be just daily decisions, and all of those things have returns on them. And so we thought, what if we flipped it a little bit just here today for just a little bit this morning and talked about the return on failure and how oftentimes God can take maybe moments that we aren't proud of and flip them around and actually, teach us something. And so we've brought maybe a handful of different experiences. Jared said he doesn't have any failures, so I'm going to turn the conversation over to him.
Perfect for the most part.
But we just thought it would be kind of fun to talk maybe about some of the things that we can look back on now and say, man, that wasn't the best moment, whether it be ministry, whether it be just life, and maybe how God still uses that, because I think it's good for really anybody following Jesus to understand that God can take failures and teach us from those too. It's not just when we're riding the mountaintops and everything's good in life. So let's have Steve start.
I have the longest list. I got 32 years of ministry, so
one
compared to
week.
12 for you and 4 for you. So I was thinking about it a little bit over the weekend, and the first one that jumped into my mind is funny, but it's me, I like to laugh. We like to have a good time, and things get us laughing sometimes. Well, there's an appropriate and an inappropriate time to laugh. And maybe I've told you guys this before, but it was in probably my first year as a youth pastor, maybe second, but it was the first church. And I was, 22, 23. And on the Sunday morning youth program, we had, I remember it was like I had a stage. It was all nice setup and everything. And before I got up to teach, there was one student in particular who had been working on the trumpet, and he had a song prepared, and he was like pushing me to let him do it. And I was like, okay, this is like, why am I doing this? But I let him do it. And he got up there, he was really proud of himself, and then he was playing the trumpet, and it reminded me of when my oldest son Zach tried to play the trumpet. He played 2 good notes, and then it would be like this awful squealing wrong note. And at first I was like, okay, he's going to get this. But then for some reason, he would go a little bit further, and then it would be the wrong squealing off note again. And I just started laughing like I couldn't control myself. And everybody, all the students are looking at me laughing. I'm laughing at a 15-year-old on the stage humiliating himself. And I couldn't get my face to, it just struck me funny, because every time it hit that note, I'd start laughing again. And I felt just awful. I mean, it's just one of those things that I don't know. The return on that was grow up. I don't know, mature. Don't be a jerk. But I wasn't trying to be. I loved the kid, but I'm sure it was very hurtful. I mean, I apologized to him. I tried to act like didn't happen. He tried to play it off like I didn't. I wasn't really laughing. I was laughing at something else. But that was an early fail.
Where is he now?
I don't know. We didn't keep contact. Andrew was his name, but I didn't forget that. But I think on a deeper level in student ministry, and I don't know, Mitch, if you'll relate to this one, but one of the things I did I was student pastor for 10 years, 4 years at one church, 6 years at another, and I made this mistake both places. And I kind of was unapologetic for it, and I think it's more like the way I handled it. So the failure was playing favorites with like a core group of my favorite students and being too obvious about it. Like you gotta you're going to have favorites. Like we have best friends. We have people in ministry we love doing ministry with the most because we just connect well. I mean, we just get along. We think the same interests, all of that. But there was a few times where I'm talking about guys that I was close to where I would hang out with them more than other guys, but some that I was in that next circle. But I would do things where I just didn't care enough how it made others feel. I didn't think about like they're on the outside, they're getting left out, and they love me and I love them. But like one time in particular, I took two guys I was closest to with Sherry and I, and it was a 5-hour drive to where my parents lived. They loved baseball too, and I took them to an Orioles baseball game with me and my dad, and it was like a great like little trip. And got back, thought nothing of it, and then like a week later, a dad of another student who was like my next closest one was like, Rob was really hurt by that you didn't include him in that, and I just didn't even think about it. And I'm like, you got to do better. And I took that to heart. And then my second ministry, I tried to be a little more cognizant of that, but also, you pour into the ones you're closest to a lot, and it's just the way it is. And sometimes it's not about you reaching out to them, it's them. I'm like, it was a situation where they would come hang out in my office. Well, I love them. They love me. I hang out with them more. I didn't tell your sons they couldn't come hang out in my office, but these guys chose to, so I became closer to them. But then, sometimes people would say they felt like they weren't, the favorites. I'm like, okay. So I felt like I wasn't all wrong, but it was like I could have done things probably more intentional to make sure others felt as important, or I don't know. What do you think?
Did
about
Jesus do that? You talked about it yesterday.
Yeah.
Jesus had his few, and then he had his more, then he had his several, and then he had everybody else.
What do you think, like the Bartholomew's of the group, like whined, like, man, I wish I was in the inner circle?
I would imagine that they probably thought that kind of stuff and said that to one another, right? Like, that's natural.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm not saying like
you're not justifying.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying like I think that's natural. Like it's almost like that's just who we are.
Yeah.
And that's and what we're designed to do. We're designed to hold a few people close, and so. But
yeah. I think you said it exactly how I approach some of those things. It's like some of it is just natural, whether it be youth ministry with students, whether it be any form of leadership, whether it be just life. Like there's natural relationships that get formed quicker and closer than others, and there's natural personalities that fit together and interests that fit together, and like I'm pretty anti like, oh, that's such a terrible thing, because it's like sometimes that's just how life is. And like you said, like I have students and guys that will text me and ask me to do things and reach out to me, and like they are it's like reciprocal, like they want to hang out with me or to spend time with me or to ask me these big questions or whatever. And then there's, guys and students that don't talk to me and don't do those things. And it's like I'm not treating those any different, but if there's students that are just naturally showing interest and it's kind of this two-way street, I think it's okay. But I understand your feeling totally, because I'm in those situations in my life right now where you can feel some guilt and a little bit of like, oh, you don't want so-and-so to feel left out, or you can start thinking about their parents and what would their parents think, and it can become a whole thing. But I generally try to hold the point of view of like, I think relationships are just natural to some degree, and that's
it'd be
okay,
like camp, every year camp and then retreats we would do. Like these guys like, you're gonna put me in your room, right? Like we're gonna hang out. I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I want to have a good time too, and I know I'm gonna have more fun with those three guys than with the next three or the other three. And that was a little selfish, maybe, I thought. But then again, like they're asking. I remember, I think you were 15, and I was like going on with the youth on a trip. We had just gotten to know each other, and you're like, "Hey, I'd like to be in your condo or whatever and hang out." I was like, "Cool." And so I told the youth pastor, "Hey, put me in the condo with Mitch because I'm going to help." And he was like, "Okay, cool." And it was like we got to know each other that way. And that was like not a favoritism. That was just a, hey. So it's kind of like, it's just like you said, natural.
But there, I guess I'm not been in those shoes, like around students much, but I guess the discernment factor comes in where you see students that, are like afraid to speak up, or they're feeling left out, but they're not able to verbalize it.
Yep.
Right.
And so those are the ones that you need to be like, those are the times you need to intentionally reach outside of your inner circle of people and be like, hey, let's, pull him in for a little bit on
For
something.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
That's just an example. So
that's one that popped up in your mind. This is an interesting thing for me to think about because, like you said, I've only been in full-time ministry for 4 years, and I know that I've had my fair share of things that I've, failed and messed up on, but it is like such a short window compared to the amount of years that you've had, and even you're right, it's just different. I think the biggest one for me, and we'll leave names and whatnot out of it because that's the other thing too, is all the things I'm talking about ministry-wise are at the church that we're
Sherry
at
said
right now.
leave names out unless it's like more than 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I don't have that. So, but for me, the biggest one was probably last year. You guys probably know what I'm referring to. Coming home from camp, there was a friend group issue that was brought to my attention all week long, of just as silly as it sounds, want to use this group message for hanging out with people that we actually want to be with. There's people in it that don't hang out with us, don't want to hang out with us, have told us they don't want to hang out with us, but we're too, scared to remove those people from the group message, yada, 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 yada. So on the way home from camp, we're all exhausted, we're tired, we've heard about this all week, and I just said, add me to the group message, I'll remove the people, and you can remove me. So they added me to the group. I removed 3 people and then left the group again. And then long story short, the following Sunday night, people that were removed were told that I was the one who removed them. Got a phone call from an angry parent, got yelled at, got threatened, if we're being honest. Had a meeting with said family, talked it out. Student expressed that they actually didn't want to be in the group message. But it was a whole thing. But that was a big one for me, of like I kind of called you almost not panicked, but just kind of like I had never had that before. Like I've had upset parents and upset students over my 4 years here, but it's always been this level of like trust, and they've been able to just like talk to me about it and like, why did you do this, or why did this look this way? I've had plenty of that, but I've never had like a, hey, how's it going? Answer the phone and then just get drilled for like 10 minutes of an angry dad on the other side. That was my first for me. And so, that was one that it was an oversight. It was something I did because it was like a quick, whatever, I'll just help these students out and do this. And it was like, as soon as I did it, I was kind of like, oh, I hope that doesn't cause any repercussions.
And they wouldn't have known if some students wouldn't have told them, because it would have been way up and they wouldn't even have realized it.
But that's it. As maybe silly and as quick as that story is, that was one for me that was kind of like, it caused me to even just shift how as simple as on a phone with a group message, just allowed me to think about that differently and not get involved in high school students' relationships in that way and friendships. So I think that was a pretty recent and pretty big one for me, of just like, oh, okay, there are repercussions and there's families, and my daughter's 1, and so it's like I get the protective dad side a little bit, and standing up for his daughter, like what happened. So but that was a shift for me of like I hadn't had that before. So there's one for me. But
there you go.
Jared, you got any?
I don't.
Do you want to
sticking with
about
it?
what we've witnessed?
I told you guys earlier already that my failures are that I care too much, and that I just love people too much, and no.
Your heart's too big.
Yeah, just it's funny because up until 8 months ago, I guess last summer, I was on stage leading worship every single Sunday. So I think most of my like failures or like things that I didn't do right were based around, moments on stage where, I played the wrong note or did something. It was something, something small, like that like caused, very little issue. But I think over the course of, doing that for ever since I was really in high school. So, a long time, allowed me to develop somewhat thick skin in that avenue, like when it comes to people not liking a song, or I saying something off key one time, and like I can so easily shrug those things off. I think that's good and also bad, because now I'm kind of numb to criticism in that arena sometimes. I think that like just looking back at my early days in ministry, I think that most people can relate to this. Both of you probably can as well. But when you're first starting out and you feel like you have so much to prove, and you kind of go so far full in that you're over your head at times with, and it causes you to lose any kind of sense of priority that you had in your life for anything else outside of the church. I remember, and you probably remember my first couple of years, like there would be things that I would just be, I'd come in at 8 a.m. and I would be here till midnight, like just going 100% full steam getting projects done. And then this was before I had kids, and Lisa Kay would be able to come over in the evenings and bring me dinner and help me out with projects and stuff like that. But I think that unfortunately that kind of derailed priorities in my life for a long time. Like even after beginning to have children, trying to redefine some of those boundaries and borders that I needed to draw in my life. Like, okay, the work stops now and like family life starts now, and, being able to clock in and clock out, which is almost impossible in ministry, like we're always texting each other after hours about certain things that, oh, hey, we need to do this, or we forgot to do this, or this person needs to be contacted, like that's just the reality of ministry. But being able to, consciously stop and actually have other priorities, for the first, probably the first 3 to 4 years, like that was, it's funny. You joke and say, oh, I care too much. But like this church consumed my life for a long time.
Let's be honest. Like when you came, we had not had a full-time worship leader for years. We had at some point, but everything had gotten it was volunteer, mostly led. And we had, 20 VCRs piled on 10 DVD players on top of, big, huge, bulky TVs everywhere. There was so much to do, right? Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, but I think it goes, I had this perfect picture of what I wanted everything to look like and what I wanted it to be. And there was nothing stopping me from getting that done, right. And so I was like, I can just go and do this and get it done. And then, you get to a point where you're like, okay, well, I think everything's set up pretty well how I want it, and then you have this other idea, and you're like, okay, cool, well, now we can change this and that and this, and I don't have any kids at home, and I did have a wife at home, but I didn't have any kids at home, so I could just do it, right? And then little by little, your other priorities and everything else in life. Like for a while, I didn't really have. I was trying to create hobbies, so like I didn't have many hobbies outside of the church, and I think now, like the repercussions of that are still kind of evident from time to time. Whenever I have a hard time saying no to people, for ministry needs, or anytime like, not because of something I wouldn't want to do or wouldn't want to help out with, but because I sometimes have this sense of guilt, like maybe I should not do that and actually have this Saturday morning to be home.
Well, I think you're hitting on error, mistake, failure that I've had too. Sherry didn't really, I was talking this over with her. She didn't really like the term people pleasing exactly. But there's a little bit of that, I think, in all three of us. Maybe some of you have it more. And I've learned that more over the years, the mistake of, I went through this, and I thought through it as my 4 different ministries, 2 as a youth pastor, church plant for 9 years, and then here. And each place different mistakes, but not wanting to lose anybody. Like I never wanted somebody to leave because I didn't do something, or I did something that they didn't like. So I would try so hard to make people happy. And I specifically mistake of just letting, like, for example, I can talk about it because it's not here, but my church plant had a vision for what that was going to look like, for what services were like. And then somebody comes in that wants to sing, and they're completely not our style. But they're good, but just not what we wanted at all, not the vision. But letting them up on the stage to do a song, and it's like, this isn't who we are. But then people will be like, why'd you do that? I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm like a church plant. I want everybody to stay. I don't want anybody to leave. And I think I didn't have enough confidence, maybe. I don't know what it was. It was just, liking people and not wanting to lose people and trying to toe that line of, okay, here's where I can and do this and keep them happy, but also not upset too many people. You know what I'm saying? It's just kind of like you love people, but that can also distract you or take you off the course of where your vision is for where you want the ministry to go. So it's a fine line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know, like we had discussions about all our individual ministries. In fact, we had one before we started this morning about, is that person the right person for this?
Mm-hmm.
Like we care about people because we are in ministry,
right.
But also like we recognize that these people these people are people. They have a heart, and most of the time we come across people with good intentions, and like they have such a good heart and they have such a good passion. But like we have, I think, and all three of us have problems discerning the negatives in people and maybe seeing like, oh, maybe they'd be better off here. Or maybe they'd be better off doing this instead. Luckily, we have somebody on our staff that Christy, who is good at discerning that in people. She's way better at that. Like we've all three put people in roles. We have examples, put people in roles and ministry positions, serving where we shouldn't have, just because we just value people, like,
or we're weak.
Like, no, I think we all, the three of us specifically, don't like telling people no. Like you were saying, like right. we want our ministries to grow, and we want as many people to be a part of it because of how much we enjoy it, and we want to be able to share that with everybody. And so, throwing somebody into a ministry role to get them involved so that they can meet people and know people and they can grow, but oh crap, maybe that wasn't the best place to put them.
Right.
So.
Yeah, for sure. It's tricky. I think being in jobs like ours, it's hard with, talking about return on failure and things like that, because everything we do is people focused and people minded. And so sometimes our failures have, repercussions that involve people and relationships, right? Which is really hard. I mean, you're the only one of the three of us that has been in the, boss leader type position. And, you've had to let people go and had to fire people and had to have those kind of decisions too, right? And it might be the best decision for the church as a whole, but because our job is so relational and people focused, right, you feel like that's a failure most of the time, even though it might not be, and it usually isn't, right, when you have to make those hard decisions.
No,
but
you're right.
That kind of stuff I think is just different for ministry as compared to other jobs too, because a lot of what we do is not only people focused, but there's a spiritual aspect to everything we do. How many times have you had that thrown in your face when you're making a hard decision that involves people, and it's, well, the church shouldn't act like this, and we should never let people go, and we should never say these, you know what I mean? Like, because people attach that to what we do.
And when you're talking about, we've had those situations, in whether it's a paid person or a volunteer person, when it's not an immoral thing,
right?
It's just like a bad fit type of thing, or it's just not, we're not on the same page type of thing. It's not like they're a bad person at all, or they've committed some sin, so they need to be rebuked and removed because of that. That makes it very difficult.
Yeah,
been there so many times and seen it on both ends. I was thinking of another failure, since I have the most.
Clearly,
I have the most. One time, it's like thinking about you guys, and when I was in your shoes leading up, the idea of, I was on a bigger staff at one point, and there was a moment in time, I remember there, where there were some of us that were on the same level, and we started to, what was really essentially gossip about a person above us, not the lead pastor, but a person above us, and something we saw that they were doing that we didn't think was appropriate. Not like something, there was nothing like an affair or anything like that going on, but something that just could give off a bad impression to people. And we didn't think it was good, but none of us had the guts to talk to him about it. And we just kept talking about it amongst ourselves for a while, to the point where I thought, all right, I'm going to be the leader here. Me and another guy, we're going to be a leader, and went to the head person about it. And I had a good relationship with the person that we were talking about. I mean, really good. But I went above him and went to the lead pastor about it and talked to him about it, which he took it well, but then it all really backfired on me, because biblically speaking, I was wrong. this was a person I had a relationship with. I had fear because he was above me, but I had a relationship that was good with them, and I talked about them instead of talking to them, and went above them. Not to want to get them in trouble, but really to just like, I want you to resolve this issue rather than me have to do the hard thing and have the hard conversation. And it was rough for a while. I had to apologize. We, worked it out. It was a tough, cold relationship for a while. Turned out, months later, it was good, got better, and is great, now. But it was, I was so upset with myself, so mad at myself because I just got caught up in it. And I think all of us that were talking about it, we felt like morally justified for our conversation. Like we care. And it wasn't like we all liked this person. We just didn't want it to be bad for the church or look bad or people to get a bad impression because of just, funny things that were being said, just casual. And I just remember just being so disappointed in myself at that, like felt like so guilty. Not that what I thought didn't need to be said. It's just I didn't handle it right. Didn't go the right way through it. Could it have backfired? That's what I was afraid of. Like if I go to that person, maybe they'll just tell me I'm an idiot and stupid and how dare you and all that. But as friendly as we were, they probably would have thanked me for it. They probably would have been a little bit resistant, but thanked me for it, and it would have been way better than what I did. So
did that change how you handled those kind of situations going forward?
So much. So that's what the return part is, right? That's what I was thinking. Like, man, I learned that lesson. I don't know that I've ever done anything quite like that again because and then, learning to be now in the role that I'm in, it's like, okay, how hard that is to be the person that receives that and know that, and, thankfully, I had built up enough credibility with both of them, that they really liked me and they knew my heart was right. They just knew that I made a mistake in the way I handle it. And it was hard because there was 6 or 7 of us in these conversations, but I somehow bore the brunt of the blame for it being this way. Cause I think I was looked at and I should be better. I should have been the leader that said, hey guys, let's stop. This is not good. We're not going to sit and talk about it. I'll go to him, but then it's like it went down the road too far. So
are you trying to tell us that if we have an issue with you, not to go to the elders, but to go straight to you?
Well, out of respect first, you should. Yeah, that's right.
But what if we think that you're gonna, fire us or something for coming to you?
I can't.
You can't fire us?
I can,
oh,
but
all right.
It would, yeah. That would
all right, me and Mitch are taking over.
It wouldn't work very well that way. So, yeah.
Well, anyway, I think, we could probably go on and on with just different stories and moments that we've had. And even sitting here as we talk about it, we're probably thinking of a few more of things that we've done over the years. And whether it be big things like some of the stuff we've talked about, big in the sense of just our ministry lives, or small things like, maybe you've had times I know I have, just maybe under preparing for a message or something as simple as that. And you get up and kind of, you think you have a hold on it and you start going, and you're like, crap, I did not do enough for this.
Yeah, like I'm sitting there preaching and thinking of a question that I would have right now. Right. That I didn't
yeah, I hate those moments.
I hope nobody asks me
Can
what
you get
that
out
means.
Google real quick?
Yeah, I was like, that's bad. And dumb stuff, one time on a youth camp trip in my second church, we went to Georgia, which was a long drive, and we spent the night on the way back at a hotel. We had a U-Haul in the back of a church van that had all the luggage in, and we pulled away from the hotel that morning. It was 8 hours away from home. And right after we pulled out of the parking lot, somebody realized that we hadn't latched the back of the U-Haul. So we stopped. We got out. We latched the back of the U-Haul. It was because the doors had swung open. Get all the way home, 8 hours later, unpacking everything, and there's 6 kids that don't have their luggage. It had fallen out in the parking lot of the hotel at the top of that hill. And so one dad rescued me. He said, I'll drive from there to, it was 8 hours. He's like, I'll drive through the night and go get these 6 suitcases that are left. But it's just I felt so stupid. Steve, come on. And of course, you call the hotel and yeah, we've had it. I'm like, probably today they would have called us right away and said it but we don't, it was a different day with cell phones and all that kind of stuff. So anyway.
Yeah, it's probably teenagers working the counter too. They're
and again, we could go on and on about that, but that's just a tired, we make mistakes, we're not perfect, but I think all three of us, like Jared said, you've said, we hold ourselves to a high standard, and we get mad at ourselves when we do things like you just said, under preparing, or taking something lightly, or just making a mistake that is a tiredness mistake, and we're just not on our game like we should. And I don't know, there's a pride factor in that too, I guess, that we have to deal with.
Yeah, and I think, we're not even touching on failures we've had in our marriages and with our kids. And, there's so much there, right? Even as high schoolers and college students, like I can think about just decisions I made and things I did that were just so dumb, if you want to just call it that. And there was a lot of failure involved in those years too. So that's what I'm saying is we could keep going with story after story after story, but maybe as we start to wrap this up, we'll flip it a little bit and kind of switch so that anybody listening, watching with, failures that they're thinking of in their own lives, how can we allow God to turn that into something good? How can we get stuff out of that? Does it just take time, or is there ways to go through a failure, go through a mistake, and then turn around and say, okay, God, how do I kind of give that to you to teach me something? So even with the stories we didn't get to share, what are some maybe thoughts that we're having right now of what do we do with failure? How do we not just beat ourselves up and feel shame and feel guilt and we're the worst people ever? How do we make it something productive? Because I think it can be, and I think that's not something that the Bible shies away from, right? Paul talks a lot about, I'm the worst of the worst, right? And he talks about the fact that he just continues to mess up and he does what he doesn't want to do. And he talks a lot about that and how God still uses him and continues to use him, and he allows God to use him so that he can boast in his weakness. And so how do we kind of get to that place, with a few of the stories we've shared, but also just as day-to-day lives, all of us probably make mistakes and little failures all the time. How do we allow God to work in that stuff too? If God works in all things, right? What's the investment on or the return on failure?
I think that I think a lot of times we amplify issues to that, like out of lack of perspective. We think that our failures are way bigger, way more monumental than they actually are. But I think one of the best ways to rectify that is just being more willing and open to share those failures with other people that can help you put those things into perspective. Like something tiny that we do that might have affected, one thing in the slightest way, we can beat ourselves up over. I should have done it this way. I should have done it that way. Why did I do this? Or the impact was minimal, and we need people that can speak truth into our lives to help us put us back into perspective. Yeah. That's not necessarily letting the Spirit change us and work in us, but I think that happens a lot, especially in my life, like little details. I think, especially for those that are on stage, we do that a lot. It's like, oh man, I said this one word that just ruined everything, or like I played this one wrong chord and that, oh man, I can't believe I did that. That nullifies everything that we did in that worship set, and then you get and you start hearing other people, well, I didn't even notice you did that, but in our mind, we're like, that's such a huge thing. Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, I can't. So I think perspective is a big thing that kind of helps level us out, and having other people that are willing to help bring us back down to earth on some of those.
Yeah.
But I don't know if
I think that's huge.
Answer to your question, but
I think
when you were
is.
talking, that's what I was thinking.
I think that's definitely a good tool to have in the tool belt with this stuff. Is the better we get at recognizing failure and recognizing some of these things and maybe putting them in their rightful place. I think, you can't do that by yourself, right? Because, like you said, we would all probably relate, like you can really get in your head and you can blow something up. Maybe that was such a small mistake or misstep and you blow it up to, really mess with your identity and your self-worth. And so having people and just getting into the practice of maybe having a little sounding board of, hey, I did this. Can you give me some perspective, or can you help me see that it's really not that terrible? I think that's huge. I think that's a really, really
Or maybe
good.
They'll tell you the opposite.
Yeah.
Why aren't you worried about this more than you should be?
Definitely.
Or
I've
more
had
than you
that.
are.
Yeah.
I have the experience to be able to have more perspective now than I did when I was your ages. It was like it was all blown up bigger to me then than it is now. I struggled in my church planning days, those 9 years, with another church that was like 5 to 10 minutes away from me that started about the same time, from we were friends, but there was this sense of jealousy and rivalry that we both felt. And it was like, at times I didn't like him. I faked that I did. And then his younger brother, who I had been his youth pastor, left his brother's church and came to our church for a while. And I got really like proud of that. Like that was wrong. Like it was all like rivalry. It was like, what is going on? That's not what church is about. And he and I Chris, I'll name his name. He knows. We talked about it. It's like there was a while there where it was just like under the cover, under the surface. It was like we didn't, we were rivals, didn't care for each other, but would pretend like we did. And it was like this weird thing. And now he's one of my closest friends in ministry. So my point is the return for me was like, we're on the same page. Like I don't feel that same way now about like there are other churches in the area. Like, I mean, I love what is happening at Sycamore Creek Church. It is awesome. We had a great day yesterday, and we had 9 baptisms and life change, people giving their lives to Christ, all that. There's a church down the street here that's a mega church in our own town that had like 100 baptisms yesterday. Am I mad about that? No, I'm not mad. I used to feel like, 10 years ago plus, like just like, oh, there's this competition. No, if they're preaching the same gospel, we're on the same page, they're just bigger than us. That's okay. There's another church down the street that had 1 baptism, and now they look at ours and like, oh, they had 9. So it's not about that at all. So that was for me a big return for me from that whole jealousy, rivalry thing I felt for like 9 years. Is now it's like it's gone. Like I mean, I can rejoice for those that are having victories, whether they're smaller, bigger, whatever. I'm more content with like, okay, God, this is where you have me. We want to grow Sycamore Creek, reach as many people as we can. You put us in this awesome location and we're growing, and that's great. And that's awesome. And I can celebrate what other people are finding successful. Mm-hmm. But I'm a competitive person, so that's something I have to fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
This wasn't supposed to be therapy for me on my mistakes.
Yeah, we need a leather couch for Steve to sit on and talk about his problems, his failures. No, yeah. So for those listening, watching, what can they take from that kind of perspective of jealousy, competition? Like kind of the toolkit of like, oh, have people around you that can tell you when you should focus on something or not focus on something. That kind of perspective I think is really good. But what could people do with that?
I think because the people that are listening are mostly not people that are working in full-time ministry like that. So it's not those same stories.
Right.
But in the world that we live in, parents that are listening that have kids that are playing sports. I have a kid, had all of my kids play sports at some point. Being able to celebrate other kids and other families, and being able to be like, not look at it as this type of thing. It's always this. It's like the big picture of life is not your kid playing sports. That's part of it, and that's part of their growth process. But being able to celebrate other people's victories in their lives, not looking at everybody as a rival, not using social media to compare yourself to say, oh, they're better, I'm going to get jealous. Like all of those things, I think that we have gotten caught up in our lives. I feel like my wife and I have talked about it, like gotten to a point where it's like those things we realize don't matter as much. When you compare people's kids, you compare your possessions, your where you live, what you drive, how you dress, all those things. They just are not that important. And you can celebrate people who have more, and people who have less. It doesn't matter. And I think I don't know though. I wish I could have grown to that perspective earlier in my life. So, the biggest thing is, I think, for you guys, learning from other people's mistakes. I'm still doing that too. Like I'm watching people that are my age and older and saying, okay, what can I learn from them? And what can I figure out about what matters most in life? So I think because it's not fun to be eaten up with any of those things like jealousy. And, I think as Christians, pastors, we try to play that down. Like we don't struggle with that. Like it's not a thing for us. But I think it is. I think it's, and if we're honest about it, most of us have it in different ways. But I think just learning more to, weep with those who weep, celebrate, laugh with those who laugh, all those things I think that are biblical ways to be in relationship with people. There's just more joy in your life when you do that, if you can find your way.
Yep. I think, closing thought for me on this, I think, we talked about it last night, so it's fresh in my brain. But Romans 12, when Paul says, you don't be conformed to the way of the world, but let God change you. And it starts with the way you think, is what Paul says, by changing the way you think or changing your thoughts. And I think a good perspective shift for us when it comes to failure and mistakes and things of that nature is, what if we began to see them as an opportunity just to come back to God, right? When you do mess up and fall short and have these moments of realizing, oh, I'm human and I do mess up, it is an opportunity to come back to God and realize and put yourself in the right place of he's so much bigger and better than me and yet still loves me and still uses me despite these things that I have going on. And I think it's a good way for us to stay humble, right? And not be the center of the universe when we have these failure moments of realizing I'm still, God's son or daughter, and God's still using me, and God still shows up, and God's still good. And even despite all, these things that I'm doing, that's not an excuse for us to just keep doing them, but it is a good opportunity for us to return to God and say, okay, I did fall short. I did mess up. This did happen. How can I walk with you and be comforted by you to maybe not do it again, or to, do it maybe differently? And I know we've talked about it before on here multiple times, but how we actually live out the will of God is by testing it and taking steps and trying things out. And that's probably going to result in failures of different kinds. But I think it's an opportunity to just keep returning to God and keep taking steps and then going back to him. And I fell short, but your grace is more than enough. And our whole theme of this podcast, right? God works for the good of those who love him in all things. And so that includes failure too. I don't know. Anybody else? Any closing thoughts on this?
If you ain't failing, you ain't living.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, the closing thought I was like, that's good. Is would I go back and change some things that I did that I failed in? Sure. I mean, I think that's part of it. But then I wouldn't be where I am if I had, there's a few I wish I would have said those things differently or handled that differently. But then I wouldn't be where I am today in making the decisions better than I used to.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's failure is a growth opportunity every time. So if you're not failing, you're not growing, right? So if you're not failing at the beginning, you're going to fail eventually. So it's you got to look back at your failures and be like, thank goodness that happened to me then. Right.
Yeah.
Because if it happened to me now, I would have been in a whole much more trouble.
And like Mitch said, thankful for the grace of God. There's forgiveness from failure and there's return to him. And I think that is really a great conclusion to it all.
Is it Craig Groeschel who always says fail forward? Is that his thing? One of his things? Maybe it's not.
I think
he's got a lot of those
I think
sounds
that
like
maybe
but I think that's one.
The leadership guru, John Maxwell. I think that he wrote a book called Failing Forward, I think.
Yeah. But that's a good idea, right? When you fail and you mess up, find ways to allow that to grow you and not just put yourself in this I'm so terrible, beat yourself up kind of place. I think that's kind of what we're hitting on.
That's
today,
right.
So
that's right.
Well, cool. I think we'll wrap this up then. Let us know what you thought as always. And as usual, let us know any questions, thoughts, topics, anything you want to hear on this podcast, and we'll continue to do our best to make it something that you want to listen to. And we will see you next week on the In All Things podcast. Goodbye. Keep failing. Bye.
Fail forward.
I don't fail.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the In All Things podcast. Our challenge for you today is to send this episode to one person. Seriously, think of somebody right now that could use this conversation and send it to them. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic ideas, please send them to podcast@sycamorecreek.org, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sycamore Creek Church so that you can always see what's going on in our world. If this conversation helped you at all, make sure you share it, leave a review, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on a single episode. We love you, God loves you, and we'll see you next week on the In All Things podcast.